everyone, I'm Rebecca and welcome back to my channel. This week I am going to be continuing on with my 1910's corset project and hopefully finishing it by the end of this video slash this week. If you haven't seen the last video, definitely go check that out. I will link that down below. But where I left off, the mock-up 1.2 is fitting decently well, except that it is 1 inch too large all the way around, and it is also very gappy at the bottom, like of the hem over or really below the hips. It's very gappy. And I went and I put on Instagram a little poll to see, for those of you who have made this pattern, if that is supposed to happen or if it is not. And kind of the consensus that I got was it is supposed to be a little bit loose, but not as loose as it is probably being for me. So I think I need to take that in just a little bit. But one of the ideas that was broached was I should try it on underneath one of my 1910's outfits, because if it is so gappy that it's actually creating bulk underneath a dress, then it is definitely way too large at the bottom. So that is what I'm going to do after I take it in the other inch. I've kind of determined that really that inch needs to come out of the back, so I am going to go ahead and reduce or increase, I guess, the seam allowance, but reduce the size of the back on every single seam to take that extra inch out. So I think honestly I'm looking at 1/8 inch per side of each seam, because there's a total of 4 seams total with 8 pieces, so therefore 1/8 inch equals 1 inch total. So hopefully that will work. And then I'm also going to smooth out the shape of the top of the back as I do that, because in taking in everything that I took in the last video with the last mock-up try-on, it wound up being really choppy as each piece met each other. So that has to be smoothed out and potentially shortened. I won't know about the shortening until I try it on again. So let's go ahead and take care of those changes, and then we'll try it on again and see what it looks like underneath a dress. So I don't know if I'm like too squishy for my own good or what, but as you can see, I have it now back on. What I just did was I took that extra inch out of the back panels by taking 1/8 inch off of each of the 4 back panels as they met the seam. So basically a 1/4 inch off on each seam, altogether relating or turning into 1 inch. And somehow I'm still lacing almost all the way closed at the top. Like, I guess that maybe that's 1 inch. It's probably where I was at before. And the waist, I feel like, is still about the same. I do feel like the hips now are a little better. The other thing that I did was I tapered in the very bottom about like this much right here. And I tapered each of the seams in so that they were honestly probably taking about a 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch off of each of the seams, like front and back down here. And I do think that we're getting kind of a better fittedness down here, with it still not being like fitted, but it being a little more slim to the hips as opposed to like a skirt, you know, just like sticking out. I'm just trying to figure out why I'm getting like similar-ish lacing gap from at least about waist up to the top now as I was before I took out a whole other inch. I don't know, because I'm like, okay, well, do I need to take out a whole other inch now? Is that what's going on here? Because again, I want that 2 inch lacing gap all the way down the back. And right now that is not what I have. And I also really want to be done with this because I'm tired of taking this in and taking this in. And I mean, I don't think it's that my fabric is stretching, like it is canvas, but I was concerned, if you watched my first video on this, I was concerned about the idea of it being just a single layer of canvas when I'm used to corsets being at least 2, if not 3 layers. And maybe it is that, like, although this is canvas and it's not meant to have stretch in it, maybe it's stretching out, and that's why it seems like I keep needing to take more and more in. I honestly have no idea, and I'm getting really tired of this project at this point. The other thing that I'm debating about doing is I do feel like the look of the other view in this pattern where it kind of cuts up a little higher and then curves down, I think that's a more graceful look. So I don't know that I'm going to cut it as high as that other view because that's really quite high. It's where this line is drawn on, if you can see that. But I think I might cut like a couple of inches, at least 1.5 inches off, and taper that down and just see what that looks like, and then go from there to see if I want to cut even more of it off. But for now, I guess I have to figure out how to widen that lacing gap because it's just too narrow from above the waist up. All right, the corset is back on. I made one additional adjustment, which was with the centermost front seams right here. I actually started a taper here and then started from there, tapered it up so that each panel was getting 1/8 inch out by the time it hit the waist, because that would remove 1/2 inch from the waist. And then I continued that taper out so that it would remove 3/8 of an inch from each of these 4 panels by the time it reached the top. And that seems to have fixed the lacing gap. I think we're at about a 2-inch even lacing gap all the way down now. So I think that's the answer. I did not yet do the little cutaway here because I realized like there's not actually any boning in that area. So I could, you know, fix all of my seam allowances now that they look immense flappy things, and then go and put the bones in all of the channels, and even like I could even bind off the top if I wanted to, but basically put all the bones in the channels, give it another try on, see if anything needs to be cut down top or cut up, I guess, but from the bottom, and then go from there. So I think that's where we're at, and I have to figure out just how much I have to cut off of all of these enormous seam allowances that are so big. Mark that on my pattern pieces, obviously, so that I don't make the same mistakes for next time. I am not going to fully take this apart though to mark them. I think I can isolate each panel well enough to figure out what I took off, and yeah, go from there and then put all of my boning channels in. And from there, it'll mostly be done. So let's go ahead and get all of that done, and we will meet up again when I go to put boning channels in to tell you how I am making these boning channels, because I don't actually know that yet. Oh, though the other thing that I have to do as I'm cutting off all of this excess is also figure out where the waist stay goes to attach to each of these seam allowances. Obviously, I have to cut off the excess before I can like stitch this in or whatever. I also have to familiarize myself with the instructions, but I think you're supposed to somehow pin this in place while you're wearing it, though I don't see how that's any different than pinning it flat, which is probably what I'm going to do because I have to get these seam allowances off, and I don't want to put on this corset inside out one more time because it is basically impossible to get all of the little busk like studs in when it's inside out. I think I have 2 right now that are skipped because they just refuse to go in. So let's talk about a couple of things here with these boning channels. So first off, what you have to do, what I didn't realize, I didn't read it first, is that not only do you have to cut these down if you have excess to 5/8 of an inch, you actually have to cut these down to about 1/4 inch, the seam allowances is what I'm talking about, because that is how they wind up fitting underneath the boning channels. And for the boning channels, the directions actually said to cut strips that were 1 3/4 inches wide on the grain of the fabric. I'm not really sure why I chose the canvas, probably just because it was already here, and that way I was like, oh, it's gonna match, and maybe just the canvas itself will add more support. I think what it's doing is actually just being kind of thick. I have one of these done already, and I mean, it does look nice. Like, look, it looks very nice, but it is pretty thick, especially in the direction that the seam allowances are, which they get pressed towards the back. But in any case, I actually decided that cutting them at 1 3/4 inches was going to be too wide for my boning, because my boning is actually a little bit narrower than what it says in the pattern. It calls for 7mm wide minus 6mm wide. Not a big difference, but enough that having that extra 1/8 of an inch on each boning channel is kind of superfluous. So I cut these to 1.5 inches wide and then folded the edges down basically so that they meet in the center and pressed that all in place. I did that by cutting it with my rotary cutter and the mat and then pressing those in place just without any bias tape maker or anything like that. And then what I did after I had cut down the seam allowances was I took my waist stay, and it was already attached in here. However, it had not told me to fold down the edge of any of these, both here and then also in the back. It had not told me to like fold in the raw edges, and it did not appear that I was going to be covering them with additional casing. So what I did was I cut off some of the excess on this one because it was too wide to just fold in, and then I stitched that down wide enough so that it could become another boning channel. I'm not sure yet if I'm actually going to stick a bone in there or not, but that is the idea. I could if I want to. This one over here had already been stitched down with the edge of this boning channel here, so I unpicked all of that because I also knew that this had to go under here as well, but I unpicked it all and then folded it underneath and pressed it back in place, stitched it back in place, and I did that after I had already put the waist stay in. So let's talk about the waist stay. I just laid the waist stay flat, coming from this area here, making it nice and smooth against the corset fabric, and then stitching right in that actually wound up on top of the exact seam, which was really great. It somehow miraculously did that for all of it, which I felt really special about because I was doing it from this side. But I did that here, and then again here, and then here, and here. The boning channel wasn't in there yet, and then to here, and then stitched that in place, caught it underneath here. So it actually ends just about here at the other side of the bone, but it's only held in place here, and I backstitched over that a couple times. Then I laid down the first boning channel here. And I did that by centering where the fold was from underneath and centering it over the seam and doing one side at first. So I stitched down this side at first, then I stitched down this side, and then from the other side, I went and I stitched not directly on the seam, but about, I don't know, a 1/16 of an inch away from that so that it would have a nice kind of finished look. I think that is what it actually said to do in the pattern too, but it just looks really nice, and it made it so that I could put a bone in each of those channels. So that's where I'm at now. Now I have to do that for all of the other seams. All of my boning channels are now on, and all of the bones are now in the channels. They stop here, and now tomorrow morning I'm going to try this on, and then we'll see if we can do the binding. It's on, boning and all, and I am really quite happy with how the fit is going all the way through here. Take a look at that nice even lacing gap all the way up, which is like, yay, that's something that I really struggle with my corsetry in general. So I'm super, super excited that that lacing gap is quite even, and it's really like this space that I want to. I didn't measure it. I don't even know if it's 2 inches. I honestly think it might be slightly larger than 2 inches at this point, because I was actually surprised when I went to go put this on just now that like I had the corset fully unlaced, you know, to the extent of the lacing cord, whatever it's called, that I have in here, and it was a really tight squeeze to get it on, whereas the same lacing was in there when I was trying it on without the boning, and it went on just fine. So I guess that maybe because I used the canvas for the boning channels, it actually did like take up quite a bit of room within the corset, because yeah, that was kind of a challenge. Like I kind of wished that I had a little bit longer of lacing so that I could have just loosened it a little bit more and gotten it on a little bit easier. Though it is also amazing how easy it is to do up a busk now that, you know, it's not on inside out. That really helps. So anyway, I think that the fit through really like all of the entire top, like I like the higher back. I think that's great because it prevents any of that kind of like over the corset bulge. I do feel like I get that on the sides, but not on the back. So I love that. That's going to stay. The one question that I'm still having is the front. Now there is definitely going to be at least one, if not two hooks that will happen down here in the front at the bottom. But I'm still kind of wondering if I want to do that cutaway cutaway. I think I am gonna do at least a little bit. Again, probably not quite as much as they have as the other view option, which would stop actually right here. So there'd be about like 3.5 or so inches, I think, that would be cut off. I think that's too much, but I think I'm gonna cut it off so that like about 2 inches, and then that curves down, because I do feel like since this is such a longer length than my old corset, I mean, it's only an inch or two, but it feels like a lot longer in this respect, because I do feel like I am moving it when my leg moves. Like even when I go to walk, I am going to feel that. And so it does make me question overall if the length is just like too long in general, but like I'm really tall and I did not lengthen the length of it from waist down. I only lengthened this corset from waist up, which is what I needed, clearly. But like if I'm that tall and it's this long on me, doesn't that mean it'd be even way longer on other people? So that's kind of where I'm at right now with that question. And again, like it is still like away from the body at the bottom, even here where the boning is, like it is hanging away from my butt even, but I guess that's how it's supposed to be. I don't know. So I think I'll do that little cutaway and then put all of my binding on everywhere. I'm planning to just use pre-made bias tape, assuming that I have enough of the pink, because I think I do. And then I'll probably add a little bit of lace detail here, just something from my stash. I haven't even looked at it yet, but I'm sure that I've got something that will be pretty cute to go up at the top. And yeah, that'll be it. Oh, and add the hooks and eyes, of course, but that'll be it. That will be the corset done. So I'm gonna go do all of that and I will show you what the finished corset looks like. So 2 things. One, I have decided on my lace. It is just this lace from the stash. It's just a modern lace. I probably picked it up at Joann's or something at some point, but I think it looks really cute. 2, while I was looking at the lace, I was actually looking a little closer at the back and I realized it's like hanging away from my body. Like it's just sticking up too high. So I am going to cut off the top. That's also going to give me that little bit of extra in the lacing. Of course, it means that I have to relace the entire corset, which is, you know, annoying. But I think it's going to be worth it to just cut off that little bit because yeah, it's just going too high and too pointy. So it's going to stop like just below where that top eyelet is or the grommet is. I'm just going to cut that right off, shorten the lacing bones in that area there, and that will be the new length for the top. So I have some good news and bad news. The good news is that I have started the binding on the corset. So you can see my bound edges there, and one other edge, and that is the bad news. I ran out of binding. Yeah, I was pretty concerned, or I don't know, I guess even pretty positive that that was probably going to happen. And it did. I managed to get 3, which I actually did not think I was going to get. I thought I was only going to have enough for 2. So I have both tops done and then I have one bottom edge done. And I did do the cutaway of the bottom front just like by 2 inches. And then I also did cut off the top and I shortened the bones in the lacing at the top on both sides, obviously. And yeah, so that's where I'm at right now. And unfortunately, I can't finish the corset today because I do not have time to run to Joann's today to get more bias tape. So hopefully that will happen tomorrow. My plan for today, though, is to continue on by putting the lace at the top. Most likely the lace is going to have to be put on by hand. I am curious, though. I mean, I showed you the lace before that I was planning to use, but then I looked online and I noticed that really most of the lace that was used on corsets of this era was significantly longer, wider than the lace that I had picked out. So I do have this one other lace here that is kind of a 2-tier situation going on, and I like the look of it. However, it is very, very cream, like almost taupe. That's how cream this is. So I think that it's just a matter of it being old and discolored. It's pretty crunchy too. So I think I'm actually going to put this in an OxyClean bath for the evening, and or at least for while I have to run out and run some errands and go to an audition. And then we'll see if when I come back from the audition, if I can go ahead, get the rest of this video edited, and then also sew this lace on tonight. And if that doesn't work out, if this doesn't go ivory, then I will most likely just use the pink narrower lace here, because it does match really, really well and it looks really cute. I just think that historically speaking, it would have been a little wider. So anyway, I'm gonna get that done and I will check back in with you probably tomorrow with the actually finished corset. So as you can see, all of the edges are now bound, the lace is on, and the corset is basically finished. I say basically because I put it on and then realized I'd actually forgotten to put those hooks on the bottom here. I don't know if I'm gonna do two because I don't really feel like I need it now that I've cut away the bottom. So I think I'm just going to do one hook, and that is going to basically prevent it from pulling at the very bottom corners of the busk right here, because I don't want to rip the fabric because of those busk corners. So that is one thing that I am still planning to do, but I think everything else is actually done. So I'll probably put that hook on like right after I finish filming this video. I'm really happy with how it turned out. I do like the lace that I've chosen here. I think it looks very, very nice. I like that wider look, so I'm glad that I went with the wider lace. And I also really like the shape that it's giving me. I feel like my old corset was very much still like vertical, which like that is what you were kind of going for in the era. But that said, like that's not what my body is. I am not vertical. As you can tell, I have hips. And I think that this corset does a good job of like allowing for the hips, but still kind of slimming the hips and keeping everything still kind of as straight as possible, but I'm still getting like the nipped in waist going on, which I really like. My lacing gap is pretty nice and even there in the back. I think it's hard to get it like exactly precisely even, but it seems pretty even all the way up and down, so definitely pleased with that. I did cut down the back too. As you can see, it is no longer poking up so much in the center back. One thing that I'm going to have to see how it goes as I wear it is that I do feel like right where my shoulder blade is, there is also a bone like aligned with that. And particularly on the left side here, I am feeling that the bone is like kind of poking at my shoulder blade. So if that's something that, you know, I'm having comfort issues with as I go on and wear this corset out, I might have to tweak that a little bit. But I think that I'm going to go ahead and try it as it is, see if it does present a comfort issue, and if so, fix it at that point. But otherwise it's, you know, again, fine as is for now. I also am quite pleased with the light color. I think this is going to do a much better job than my old corset about like not showing outside of garments. So many of the like 19-teens era garments are all these light, white, thin sort of things. And I have noticed, particularly with this dress right here, I have noticed that even when I'm wearing a princess slip over my stripy corset, I feel like I can still see those stripes even through the slip and the exterior dress. So I think that this one's going to be much better at that. I do find it interesting that like when wearing black undergarments like I am right here, I can't actually see where the waist state is because it's a single layer corset, and right there it's double. So I do find that kind of interesting, but yeah, overall, I'm very pleased with this. It'll be interesting to see how different it might feel as I'm wearing it out compared to my old 19-teens corset, particularly because it is just a little bit longer. Now that I have cut it away, I don't really feel like there is like a mobility issue. I don't feel like it's getting in my way as I walk, where I think that when it was even just that like 2 inches longer right here in the front, I felt like it was more constricting. So I would recommend, if you go to make this pattern, even if you're not doing the full cutaway of the other view, cut it away at least a couple of inches just to give yourself a little bit more mobility there. Also, if you are not as tall as me, you may want to shorten the whole thing because it does still, I mean, this is long and I'm 5'10", so something to keep in mind. You may need to shorten the area waist down to the hem. Or if you're tall like me, you may need to lengthen the area waist to the top, because again, I did add 3 inches from the waist to the top on average. Some of it was a little bit less than that, but about 3 inches from here up I added. So keep in mind that this corset pattern is incredibly short-waisted, and also if you are squishy, it runs very, very large. So do your mock-ups. I mean, luckily running large, you can just keep taking it in. And I think that really like the fitting of this wound up working. Yes, it involved a lot of going back and taking stuff in and then taking it in again and then again. But in the end, I am happy with how this fits. And I would recommend this corset pattern because I think that the instructions were pretty clear. Even though I'm not one who is good at reading instructions, they were still pretty clear. And again, I have that pattern linked down in the description below if you want to check that out. So yeah, overall, I would say that this is a successful project, and now I'm going to be able to have a new corset that is not falling apart to wear under all of my various 19 teens outfits. So anyway, if you liked this video, please go ahead and click the thumbs up icon. And if you'd like to see more videos like this from me, please go ahead and click subscribe and the little bell icon to be notified every time I post a new video. I do post videos here on YouTube at least once a week with sewing vlogs like this out on Tuesdays, and sometimes additional content out on Saturdays, but I post every day over on my Instagram, so please go follow me over on Instagram. That's at Lady Rebecca Fashions. And if you'd like to help support all of the work that I do on this channel, I do have a link to my Patreon and my Ko-fi down in the description below, or you can send me a super thanks or join my YouTube channel memberships right here on YouTube below the video. I'd also like to give a special shout out to my Edwardian level patrons, Mirage, Jean, and Janelle. Thank you all so much for joining me today. I hope you all have a wonderful week, and I will see you very soon in my next video. Happy sewing!